the Romans sent north an army several thousand strong, confident they could expel the invader.
The Roman army had covered hardly 11 miles before it met the invaders, where the river Alia descends in a deep gully from the hills. The ground in front and on both sides was already swarming with enemy soldiers.
The Celts dressed in brightly colored tunics and checkered cloaks. Round their necks, they wore richly patterned torques. On their bodies, armbands, rings, jewels. As artists, these pagans were unequaled. Their ornate designs would reappear in another age, on the pages of the Gospels. The superstitious transformed into the sacred. Most warriors entered battle armed with only a spear and a shield. Some spearheads measured up to 20 inches in length. Others had undulating blades to mangle flesh. A nobleman's greatest weapon was his sword. Crafted by skilled blacksmiths, it was sturdily forged, not for thrusting, but slashing. Over time, swords were made even larger, up to 3 feet long. The finest swords, the privilege of the wealthiest men, were studded with precious stones to awe a foe from afar. Up close, their length and strength made a fearful impression. Before battle had even begun, the Celts could terrify their enemy into flight by their very appearance. A tall race of men, half naked, screaming and thrashing, their hair smeared with lime to stand up in spikes. They looked to the Romans like apparitions from the underworld. Even their helmets seemed the work of demons.
On their heads, they wear bronze helmets with large projecting figures, lending the appearance of enormous stature to the wearer.
Near the river Alia, the Celts gathered, more mob than army. Though motley in dress, they were united by their battle standards, animals of the forest and birds of prey. Whipping themselves into a frenzy, the warriors raised their terrible cries, broke into chants, and sang hymns of war. Now and then, a lone Celt would step forward and dare an opponent to fight. Above the din, the Romans heard the fearsome call of the Carnix, the Celtic battle horn.
The Roman commanders had taken no precautions. They drew up their line on as broad a front as they could, hoping not to be outflanked by the enemy's superior numbers. But the hope was vain.
Brennus, the Gallic chieftain, sized up the Roman army. Outnumbered, outflanked, unnerved. He ordered his men to attack. Every man threw himself into the fray.
Celts overran all the ground, in front and on both sides. At the first sound of the Gallic war cry, the legionaries fled in panic, so blinded to everything but saving their skins, hardly waiting even to see their strange enemy from the ends of the earth. None fell fighting. They were cut down from behind as they struggled to force a way to safety through the heaving mass of their fellow fugitives. Near the bank of the river, there was a dreadful slaughter. The whole left wing of the army had gone that way and had flung away their arms in a desperate hope of getting over. Many could not swim, and many others, in their exhausted state, were dragged underwater by the weight of their equipment and drowned. The Celts could hardly believe their eyes. For a while they stood, rooted to the spot, hardly realizing what had happened. Then, after a moment of fear, lest the whole thing were a trap, they began to collect the arms and equipment of the dead.
As night fell, the Celts, victorious again, made camp. Nothing stood between them and the spoils of war. The rich city of Rome. The next day, the Celts stormed through the city gates. No Roman came out to resist them. The citizens had barricaded themselves on a hill within the capital. The wild men of Europe gazed dumbstruck at sights they had never beheld, high temples and grand buildings. Then they turned to plunder.
For the Romans, the full horror was almost too great to realize. Fate had made them spectators of the nightmare stage scene of their country's ruin.
The Celtic leader Brennus strode up to the senators at the capital and delivered an ultimatum. Pay a ransom and his men would leave. If not, the nightmare the Romans were living would seem merely a dream next to what would follow. The citizens brought gold and jewels to be tallied up, then complained at the way the booty was being weighed. Brennus is said to have added his heavy sword to the scales and declared, "Vae victis," woe to the conquered. When the tribute had been paid, the Celts were true to their word. They marched